Hi, it's Sunday afternoon. I guess tonight's going to be the fourth Hanukkah candle. And we'll do another piece of the lesser-known stuff about Hanukkah, especially in connection with Gaza. The parallels are remarkable. Not exactly parallel. You'll see what I mean in a second. This is being sponsored this whole week, by which I mean 3 out of the 4 podcasts are being sponsored by my very good friends, Ed and Messa Leventhal, Dr. Ed Leventhal, Dr. Messa Leventhal, both of whom reside now in Pennsylvania, escaping the rat race. And both of them, by the way, served in the United States Armed Forces in the first Gulf War. For those young people listening to this, that happened in ancient times. President Bush Sr. and General Schwarzkopf. And so the Leventhals do know about the military and all the stuff that implies. Now, today is, as I say, the middle of Hanukkah, and we're in the middle of a war in Gaza, as we all know. And it just struck me remarkable. Yesterday in Shul, I was going through with some people some of the text of Yosifon, which I mentioned the other day. Yosifon here, one of the golden oldies of the Jewish historiography. Doesn't mean it's true. It doesn't mean it's accurate. I did not say that. It's like a from knockoff of Josephus, plus other stuff as well. When it comes to Hanukkah, it's very complicated. I don't want to be too scholarly over here or anything, but there's the first book of Maccabees, second book of Maccabees, and the Apocrypha. But the original of the first book of Maccabees, if you look at it, is actually in Hebrew. So you can tell by the way the Greek is. They use a lot of Hebraisms. And I think I've talked about that before. So without boring you, there used to be once upon a time a book called Sefer Maccabee. We don't have it anymore. We have the Greek translation of it. Anytime there's a translation, you cannot know if they translate exactly, not exactly, if they cut and pasted. You don't know. It seems to be that's a pretty accurate and straightforward story, which is why it's always caused trouble to people, because it doesn't mention anything about the miracle of the oil. It's a clear-cut narrative, and a from one, I would say, of the Maccabean campaigns, of the military side of the struggle, through Hanukkah and after Hanukkah, and then to the death of Judah Maccabee and his brothers after him, and so on and so forth. So you might call it a chronicle of the Jewish War of Independence, which was a long and bloody affair. It was not over Hanukkah. It wasn't Pashat Chanukah Hey. They beat the Greeks, and then everybody sat down and ate latkes, on the 25th of Kislev. It wasn't like that at all. And involved lots of wars afterwards as well. Now, right now, as you know, the Israeli army is engaged in Gaza. Now they're past Gaza into Khan Yunis. And they're trying to finish off the last of the bad guys. I'm talking about the people who perpetrated those atrocities on Simchas Torah. And we wish them Hatzlacha. What is the Maccabean? What is Hanukkah? Let's put it this way. And you know and I know, we're seeing in the papers, that the Israeli soldiers are lighting menorahs everywhere. Chabad naturally got into the act. Now they really have a mitzvah tank. They put as a tank. And they're putting menorahs everywhere and Mosul and so forth and so on. Of course, I get it. But has Gaza ever been engaged with Hanukkah or Jewish history at all? And the answer is there always has been a Jewish community in Gaza until not that long ago, when the rise of the Arab-Israeli conflict, when the time of the Zionists before 1948, when it got too hot and the Jews had to get out of Gaza to save their lives. The same way they ran away, for example, from Hebron and things like that. That's how it was. But if you look at the story of Hanukkah, it's got nothing to do with Gaza. Not necessarily. As a matter of fact, in the Maccabean campaigns, there are references to Gaza, which is not that far from Yerushalayim. And the Jewish headquarters was in Jerusalem, and they were being attacked by Goyim all over the place, not only by the Syrian Greeks, and not only by the Hellenist Jews, but by other kind of junk over there also. Various Arab groups, who knows, left over from the Canaanites, semi-Hellenistic populations, different tribes. The Seleucids themselves had moved in a certain number of foreigners to settle in Israel. If you read the book of Maccabees, it says that the plan at one point, before the Battle of Emos, after Judah Maccabee had defeated several of the Greek armies and had enraged King Antiochus IV, in the book of Maccabees it says that he organized a huge army to march against them, to wipe out the Jews and settle guy on their place. It says that. Look it up. Right? To divide up by lot and give it out to non-Jewish settlers. Herod later on did that. The Romans later on, after Bar Kokhba rebellion, did that. That's how we lost Israel. It so happened, and it didn't work on this occasion, because Judah Maccabee was a better general, and of course he had Siyata Dishmaya, and so he defeated, in a brilliant battle called the Battle of Emos, the three armies that were going against him, and that plan was not carried out. So I'm just saying that to emphasize that it was a time of war of everybody against everybody, or at least everybody against the Jews. The only thing is the Jews were led by the Maccabees. They were tough hombres, and therefore they beat everybody. It wasn't Pashut, and they had casualties. I mean, I'm not saying it was simple. It's a bloody business, but they did win. One of the interesting things has to do with Gaza, only because there's a war going on there now, which was not a place inhabited by Jews per se. I mean, there was a small Jewish community there in the time of the Baisheni. In the period I'm talking about. But mostly it was these locals, which is a mixture of the Greeks and the Hellenistic settlers and the old Arabs and who knows what. I shouldn't use the word Arabs because they weren't there, but different groups. And what's interesting is that you have, as I tried to point out the other day, different accounts. Maccabees 1, Maccabees 2, Josephus, Josephon, and so forth. And if you look through them, they're not identical, but they all have a Gaza component in interesting ways, which would indicate to the regular historian somewhere along the line was at least one major battle in Gaza, which is remarkable compared to what is today. Rather than pull out all the and just read you sort of boring kind of account, I found an article which summarized it very briefly. I want to share it with you and give you what it says in the Josephus and Book of Maccabee accounts. And then afterwards, read you what it says in Josephon, which is remarkable considering what is going on right now as I speak. And you listen. He mentions over here in this article, which is from 2014, that, and he's summarizing, that it was in the year 145 BCE, so that would be 20 years after Hanukkah, 2 decades after the liberation of the temple, that Yonasan, the youngest of Matthesiah's 5 sons, attacked Gaza and its hostile population. So this is a period of time after Judah Maccabee was killed in battle by the Greeks. As I mentioned many times in the past, if you follow through the story, yes, Judah Maccabee defeated the Greeks over and over again and was able to liberate the temple and do Hanukkah and Mizbeach and all the rest of it. That is all true. But the Greeks came back again and again, and eventually they took them down. 5 years later, the Battle of Elosa. So 165 BCE is Hanukkah. 5 years later, 160 BCE is the death of Judah Maccabee, which was followed by tremendous persecution of the Frum by the Hellenists. It says it was worse than before. But eventually, one of Judah's brothers, they start out with 5 brothers, right? According to the story. These are the 5 sons of Mattisiah. It's Judah, Jonathan, Yochanan, Shimon, and Yonasan. Right? So, Judah Maccabee. When he had a brother, Yochanan, who was killed by treacherous Arabs at a certain point. I won't go into that. So there's 4 brothers left. And when Judah Maccabee died, there's 3 brothers left. Right? Actually, yes, 3 brothers left. So it'd be Shimon, Yonasan, and Eleazar had fallen under the elephant in that battle. Remember, the elephant crushed him. So there's 2 brothers left. Yonasan and Shimon. So Yonasan took over first, and he fought his battles and all this kind of stuff. And he was able to play politics, play off one Greek ruler against another. That's a whole story by itself. But at one point, he got involved with Gaza. And it says over here in 145, Yonasan, the surviving son of Mattisiah, attacked Gaza and its hostile population. Okay? And Josephus writes in Antiquities in volume 13, talking about Yonasan, he set a part of his army around Gaza itself. In other words, Yonasan, the Maccabee, surrounded the city of Gaza in some way. So that with the rest, in other words, so he took half the army and surrounded the city. And with the rest, he overran their land and spoiled it and burned what was in it. This is how you used to do siege warfare once upon a time. You do scorched earth. Remember Stalin did in World War II? Many countries have done this. Scorched earth. So you burn all the crops and everything, and that way you're going to hurt the food supply of the besieged city and compel it to surrender. So the Jews did that. Okay? When the people of Gaza saw themselves in this state of affliction, Josephus reports, they sent to Yonasan and professed that they would be his friends and offer him every assistance. So as though they flipped. It's the Middle East. Napoleon once said, Italy has never ended a war on the same side it started, which is true. So a lot of that is in the Middle East as well. And so when Gaza saw they're up the creek, they said to Yonasan, oh, we're really friends of the Jews and all the rest of it. In other words, he conquered the area, pacified it thoroughly, and compelled the residents of Gaza to sue for peace. Okay? Now, I'm continuing. Now, nonetheless, despite their professions of amity, the residents of Gaza continued to agitate against Israel. Notice they lied. Leading Shimon the Maccabee, so notice Yonasan was in charge for, I think, 8 years, if I remember correctly. And then he was assassinated. So the last brother was Shimon. He took over. And the situation was such that the Gaza residents continued to raid the Jews. So Shimon said, I'm going to settle this business. As recounted in the first book of Maccabees, it says, in those days, Shimon camped against Gaza and besieged it round about. He also made an engine of war and set it to the city and battered a certain tower and took it. So notice he didn't fool around. He had what we call high tech, which was battering ram, and they battered a hole in the wall of the city of Gaza. Shimon's soldiers entered the city of Gaza, which led the local population to cry with a loud voice, beseeching Shimon to grant them peace. Now, all the news reports will tell you that if not for the fact that the Hamas is among the population, and anybody who says we want to surrender, we just want peace, the Hamas will kill you. But the overwhelming majority of the civilian residents of Gaza right now, the Gaza Strip, would be in the same situation. Once the Jews broke in, they say we give up, and it's all over. We don't want violence anymore, because why should they want their lives uprooted and their houses destroyed and plus the collateral damage? It's just that the Hamas, as a terrorist group, has such a control. And I know you know this because if you're listening to this, you follow the news. They Al Jazeera and all, they jiggle the news all the time, and they lie to make it look like they're good and all the rest. I mean, I know you know that. So, if people say, I'm sure you've seen this. They'll interview an Arab guy and they'll say it's all Hamas' fault. All of a sudden, the newspaperman will take the microphone away and go to somebody else. So 2,000 years ago, it wasn't like that, and the people sued for peace. They implored the Maccabee. Notice they said to Shimon, do not deal with us according to our wickedness, but according to your mercy. Which is a pasuk, right? How's it go? Lo lefi something, lefi rachamecha. The point is, yes, we messed you over, but don't treat us as we treated you. Is this not exactly what the Gaza is saying now? Right? We know what we did to you. We burned babies, we baked them in ovens, we chopped up their head, we raped the women and did worse things even than that, etc., etc. But don't do to us as we did to you. Instead, deal according to mercy. Shimon agreed, but not before taking a series of measures to try to ensure that Gaza would never again pose a threat. So here we mamish have what's going on in the Israeli government right now, which in the newspapers they call the day after. What is the plan for the day after? Right now, you're fighting on conquering Gaza and so forth and so on. The United Nations tried to stop it the other day. Good old President Biden blocked that. He has been, I would say, in this particular crisis, a beacon of moral clarity, which is pretty rare. And you got to give him credit for what credit is. I don't care what the politics is. He's been a beacon of moral clarity. And it's because he and his administration are so stark on this that the university professors have to back down and some of them are quitting. Because otherwise they tough it out. Anyhow, so what did Shimon Maccabee do thousands of years ago? He placed such men as would keep the law and made it stronger than it was before. In other words, he put in from Jews, men who would keep the law. In the book of Maccabees means from Jews, a garrison, you might say, over there. Mamish like the Gush Katif, remember, that sort of thing. Essentially reimposing security on the unruly strip of land. He also sent Jews to settle the area. Aren't you reading this now in the paper? Ben Gvir and these other guys, they said we should reestablish the settlements that were destroyed by the Arabs. And he even built himself a house in Gaza. So Shimon Maccabee, in order to show I ain't leaving, he made himself a house, a big fancy house in Gaza, as if to underline the fact that the Jewish people had every intention of remaining. But even these measures did not quell the Gaza problem, and it popped up later under Alexander Yanai, who was, I guess, a nephew, great nephew of Shimon Maccabee, but I won't go into that now. That's a whole story by itself. The point is that according to what you read in the book of Maccabees, and in Josephus' retelling of it, where you can certainly see when Josephus I'm talking about, the real Josephus, this book, right? So when he does it, he used older sources. If you go like a Victor Miller, he shot the ball a little bit here and there. That's possible. But the point is, he basically used older sources, including the first and second book of Maccabees, but other sources as well. Remember, Josephus undoubtedly had access to the Hebrew original of the Sefer Maccabee. So, just to reiterate, regurgitate perhaps, there are two books of Maccabees in the Apocrypha. First book of Maccabees, second book of Maccabees. The first book of Maccabees is certainly Hebrew. It just hadn't survived in Hebrew. The second book of Maccabees is written in a way that it's from Greek. Okay? It was written by good Jews, patriotic Jews, but it's written in Greek. The same way you read Art Scroll in English. Right? That's how it goes. But the original first book was in Hebrew. And Josephus used that. So that's why sometimes it's possible you might see a discrepancy in the account provided by Josephus on the one hand, and what we would call the Apocryphal books on the other, because we only have the Greek. Now, I don't want to bore you with all those scholarly details, so suffice it to say that in Josephus, he is, telling over the story the way he has it, even though it doesn't agree 100% with what you find in the book of Maccabees that we have. However, in the book of Yosifon, which I tell you is a from knockoff, who also undoubtedly had access to the original Maccabees in Hebrew. That's what I want to emphasize. Not the Miguel Santiago's. That's a different thing altogether. It's not reliable, but I'm talking about the original of the book of Maccabees. And it's hard, it's a wonderful exercise. If I had the time to run a grand seminar here online, I would do the whole Yosifon on Hanukkah, pages and pages, and compare with the other ones that you see niflaos. Okay? And it is interesting to me that so far, no one has, to my knowledge, no one has translated Yosifon into English, which would be very interesting. I mean, all joking aside, that'd be one heck of an art scroll or a Feldheim book, because the Frumies all go or into Josephus, the Rishonim were into Josephus. I'm talking about Yosifon. And so were the, let's say many of the Rishonim and Achronim, like the Maral. And so, reliable, not reliable, whatever. It's a very famous work in Jewish history. It's one of the most famous and popular books produced by the Jews, even though today it's not known. So my point is that if you go in Yosifon, in chapter 21, Yisibra Bo Sibra Milchamas Yehuda Gvurosov, the campaigns of Judah Maccabee and its heroism. This is post-Hanukkah, meaning after they captured Beis Hamikdash and had Hanukkah's Mizbeach. So in the book of First Maccabees, it says that Judah Maccabee had the lead like Entebbe expedition, like I told you the other day. The Jews in the other parts of Israel being attacked and wiped out by the local Goyim. And so the story goes that Judah Maccabee had to lead an army across the Jordan to rescue the Jews there, and his brother rescued the Jews in the Galilee in a similar campaign. I did this once in the past in detail, so if you look in the old podcast, you'll find it somewhere. I did it in detail. Now, in here, it tells you something that's not found in our edition of the Book of Maccabees. It has to do with Gaza, which is why I'm doing this today. And it says that Judah Maccabee fought in Edom, and fought in this place and that place, and he mainly fought against a guy who here is called Timotheus or Timotheus. And he's the leader of the Greeks or the Goyim on the other side of the Jordan River. Now over there it sounds like they just had a big battle and busted him eventually. Here it sounds like he escaped by disguising himself. Mamish like Sinwar, like this mamzer. And who knows what's going to happen to the leaders and the perpetrators from the Hamas. But here Timotheus escaped, and he eventually ended up in the Gaza type area, okay? And here comes the paragraph I want to read to you. Now, I'm not saying this is exactly accurate historically, but it's a very old text, and it might be. It says, Vayonas Timotheus Misham Derech HaYarden, after a big battle with the Jews beat him, Timothy fled Derech HaYarden, V'Yehuda Rachav Achal V'Chakos, and Judah Maccabee chased him, Misham Baruch Derech Chof HaYam, and he got to the Mediterranean, Vayovo Azasa, and he escaped to Gaza. So, the Yechia Sinwar of yesteryear, named Timotheus, escaped to Gaza. Vayechazik Maimon Timotheus Makahu, and he reinforced himself there. He got a lot of support there. Vayarach Melchama Im Yehuda, and from this new base in Gaza, he launched another war against Judah Maccabee. Ki Nesrolov called Gedud Chel Pleshas and Sharm. Amazing, like the parallels nowadays, because they're gathered to him called Gedudei Chel Pleshas and Sharm. All the armies of Philistia or Palestine that were remaining after the previous attacks, which is exactly what these guys have done now. They took these guys out of jail, and perpetrated what they did. So Judah Maccabee marched against them and came to the place of war, meaning in Gaza Strip. And Judah Maccabee, in his regular style, charged the enemy and fell upon them the way a wolf falls upon sheep. And Timothy freaked out and ran away. And his army scattered in every direction. And he went to Gaza. And he locked the gate. And he was battling against Judah Maccabee from inside the fortified city of Gaza. And Judah and the Maccabean army approached the city. Is this crazy? Mamish in December of 165 BC or 164, whatever. And the Jews attacked Gaza for 5 days and couldn't take the city. Could not take the city. And the 5th day, the Goyim, let's put it this way, overplayed their hand. And some of Timothy's men went to this big tower, which was in the wall, and they blasphemed and cursed the anointed one, meaning Judah Maccabee. Because Judah Maccabee was a Mashiach. He's described as a Mashiach in the book of Maccabees. In the book of Yosefon. Mashiach simply means he was anointed. And earlier in Yosefon it says he was anointed as a Nagid and a Mashiach Melchama, as a military commander and as a priest for war. Doesn't say Kohen Gadol. I don't know how you can be Medayik exactly in Lashonis and the Yosefon. Believe it or not, there are Achronim that do. But I'm just sharing with you that for what it's worth, because you probably never heard of Yosefon. Anyhow, so they came and they cursed Judah Maccabee. But not only that, and they said disgusting insults against the Rebbeinu Shalom. I don't want to say what they said. A very frum book. I'm not going to repeat what they said. So 20 young guys, hot Rambos from the Maccabean forces, 20 young guys, Meir Kahanas, got so angry. They heard all this blasphemy that the bad guys were uttering. Now comes a movie. And they took on their shield in their left hand and their sword in the right hand. They charged suddenly, unexpectedly, the wall. And one got to the wall. And then came another one. They immediately put a ladder up, and they charged up the ladder and jumped into the city. Is this a movie? And they fought the guys. So they charged up and they stabbed the guys, and charged them at the top of the wall. And the first two guys killed a bunch, and that made room for the other 18 guys coming after them. And therefore they got into the city, and then they went down from the walls into the city, and they screamed, and they stabbed everybody, left dead bodies everywhere. They came to the gate of the city, and they fought against the defenders of the gate of the city. In other words, these 18, 20 guys, whatever, were trying to open the gate from the inside, and meanwhile the Maccabean army, having seen this charge from the outside, so the gate was under pressure from inside and outside. And the Maccabean army on the outside approached the gate, which the defenders were busy trying to fight up the guys on the inside. And the guys on the outside were able to burn down the gates of the city, Gaza. And the gate collapsed. And the Hashmonaim army captured Gaza. And they captured the blasphemers. And they admitted. So they were like the Hamas. They said, yeah, we did it. They said, yes, we said it. And the Maccabees burned these guys in fire, meaning they burned them at the stake. And they launched a massacre in Gaza. Vayargu is called Zechura, and they killed all the men. They didn't stop killing for 48 hours. My goodness. Now in that time, there were no laws of war. There was a big population. Timotheus, and the leader Timothy ran away. And he hid in a bore, like a tunnel or something. Isn't it crazy? The leading bad guy hid in a bore. Okay? V'lo nimsa. And he got away, didn't find him. And they found brothers of the bad guy. Bro Babylonius, that's their name. And they brought him to Judah Maccabee. And Judah chopped off their heads. And they captured all the spoils of the city, but they didn't capture the main guy. They returned to Jerusalem singing Hallel and all that. That's what they did. Now, again, I don't know if this story is exactly true. Maybe it is, maybe this is no way of telling. But isn't it extraordinary that you had a bloody battle in Gaza on Hanukkah, or not on Hanukkah, but by the Hanukkah people, by the Maccabees, as a follow-up. Mainly because the bad perpetrator, the guy who launched the massacres of the Jews in the Ever Yarden, which I can almost guarantee you, they did the same thing at that time that the Hamas did now. So the Jews said, this is a guy we're going to get. He's going down. And he escaped to Gaza, and he escaped Gaza too, because he hid in the bore. And the Jews captured the city. The people who paid the price for giving him shelter was who? The people of Gaza. You understand? By teaming up with him, or allowing him to have headquarters there, that was their doom, because it said they spent 48 hours killing everybody there, all the men. So, now Israel doesn't play that way. If they want to or not, they don't play that way. But they did once upon a time. And the message was simple. You leave me alone, I'll leave you alone. Judah Maccabee never had anything to do with Gaza. Get what I'm saying? You don't bother me, I don't bother you. It's not that we're aggressive and looking to go and attack other people. You don't bother me, I don't bother you. You bother me, it's the last thing you ever did. That was a policy in those days. King David had a similar policy. And Israel, according to current conventions, is trying to do that now. Because literally, they were trying to make it that, you have Gaza, Hamas, stay there, do your own thing. Don't bother me, I won't bother you. I don't see that was right. In retrospect, we see that Bibi and the Israelis made a tremendous mistake with that. And all the newspapers now, from the New York Times down and on, are making fun of Israel because of that. Even though they supported such a policy before, the newspapers are always liars and hypocrites. That's the way it goes. And they're always Monday morning quarterbacks. What can you do? But it turns out that it wasn't like that. It wasn't simply like, you leave me alone, I'll leave you alone. Instead, they took advantage of it and did terrible things to us. And now Israel's trying to say, okay, that's a big mistake on your part. Now, Israel cannot do to them what they did to us. Not in this year. But they're at least trying to say, let's get Timotheus. Let's get the bad guys. Let's get the people in Gaza. So you see, history really repeats itself. And I wonder, I mean, I know this. It's not, let me put it this way. This is not an unknown sefer. But it's not so well known. Otherwise, you can ask your friends. Many of you listening have friends, relatives in the service in Gaza. And they have the Rabbanim Tzvaim, the military rabbinate over there, who probably guys with yeshiva education. Yeshiva education, you wouldn't know you'll see fun. Even though it's a fun book. Otherwise, don't you think they would be reading this to the soldiers now during Hanukkah? Because the parallels are extraordinary. The differences are also significant. Anyway, I just wanted to share that point, that Gaza does play a role in the Maccabean story in remarkable ways. And I got to go to Mincha now. So, again, I want to thank the Leventhal's. We're sponsoring almost this whole week. And this is in memory of the father and mother, Harry K. Leventhal and his wife. And we're very grateful. And we'll return to this subject next time.